Good morning and good day. Welcome to 3:15 o'clock, that very channel where the unspoken becomes unforgettable. Do you have the courage to explore the stories they always wanted to hide from you? This is not just a horror channel. This is a place where silence is shattered by secrets, and every story carries a weight of fear it was never meant to bear. The first story. The hitchhiker, the tire screamed on the wet asphalt of I-80 in Nebraska, and my Honda spun into a violent waltz. The world outside the window became a carousel of slanted rain lines, darkness, and the reflections of my own headlights on the slick pavement. The last thing I saw before the impact were giant horned shadows on the roadside, frozen like ancient menhirs. Not deer, no, they were too large, too still, as if carved from the very fabric of the night. The impact was deafening yet strangely muffled, as if someone had covered the car with a thick blanket. My head snapped back against the headrest as the airbag exploded with a powdery, fabric-smelling puff. The windshield cracked into a spiderweb. The silence that followed was thicker and more terrifying than any noise, broken only by the steady drum of rain on the metal roof and the hiss of steam from the punctured radiator. I came to from a knock on the window. Sharp, insistent, unlike any sound of the storm. My heart hammered somewhere in my throat. Slowly, fighting a dull ache in my neck and shoulder, I turned my head. In the cracked window on the driver's side was a man's face. It was illuminated by a sudden flash of lightning, giving it the unreality of a theatrical mask. His features were regular but somehow blurred, as if veiled by haze. And most importantly, a complete, absolute calmness bordering on indifference. Not a trace of the alarm or sympathy you usually see on the faces of people witnessing an accident. "You look like you need help," he said. His voice was even, deep, and somehow it wasn't drowned out by the downpour, but sounded as if it originated from inside the car itself. I mumbled something incoherent, trying to unbuckle my seatbelt. My hands were clumsy. "Are you hurt?" he asked with the same icy politeness. "I don't know. I think I'm just bruised." I wiped a strip of the glass with my palm, trying to see what was behind him. Darkness. Solid. Impenetrable. No lights from another car. No lights from any dwelling. "Where did you come from?" "I don't see your car," he smiled. It was a slow, unnatural smile that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were like two pieces of wet coal, utterly empty. "I was walking. Nearby. My car broke down," he said. The phrase sounded like a rehearsed line. "You're lucky I was close. Not many people drive this stretch at night, especially in this weather." He tapped the glass with his knuckles. "Open up, let's see how you are. I have a first aid kit." Instinct screamed that opening the door to a stranger in the middle of nowhere was a bad idea, but reason insisted I was trapped. The car was wrecked in a ditch. My mobile phone, which had been on the passenger seat, was gone, vanished into the darkness, thrown by the force of the impact. I was tethered to this metal coffin in the vast Nebraska prairie. With a click, I unlocked the door. He opened it easily without effort, as if the car weren't tilted at an angle. The smell of wet earth, wormwood, and something else, sweetish, musty, like the abandoned barn, invaded the cabin. He was tall and thin, dressed in a long, dark coat that remained strangely dry despite the pouring rain. He leaned in and his long fingers touched my temple with unexpected tenderness, checking the bruise. "Minor concussion," he concluded. His touch was cold, like the metal of the door. "Lucky, very lucky. Not everyone gets off so easily on this road." He produced a small old first aid kit from the folds of his coat, made of worn leather. Not a standard issue one, but something old-fashioned with embossed patterns. Inside were bandages, bottles of brown liquid, and metal instruments that looked more surgical than medicinal. "No need, I'm fine." I tried to pull away. "Need." His voice sounded firmer. For the first time, there was emotion in it, a hint of impatience. "A wound is a door, and doors here are better kept closed." With a quick, precise movement, he wiped the abrasion on my arm with something that stung, and I cried out. He just nodded. "Endure it. Cleansing always requires a sacrifice." Finished, he moved back and squatted by the open door, blocking the exit. The rain had almost stopped, replaced by a thick, prickly fog that enveloped the car in a milky white shroud. Visibility dropped to 0. "My name is Eli," he said, looking at me with his black eyes. "Luke," I forced out. "Luke," he repeated my name, stretching the sound as if tasting it. "You were in a hurry, Luke. Too much of a hurry. Running from something? Or to something?" The question took me by surprise. How could he know? I really was running. From creditors, from a failed business, from the ruins of my life in California. I was driving to my sister in Chicago, hoping to start over. This trip was a desperate attempt to escape. "Just driving," I lied. Eli smirked. The sound was like the creaking of old wood. They all are. "Just driving. Until the road demands its price. These lands, they are old. Older than your cities and roads. They have memory and appetites." He fell silent, gazing into the white veil of fog. The Pawnee called this place the Trail of Whispering Shadows. They didn't build wigwams here. Didn't hunt. They passed through quickly, leaving gifts, small sacrifices to the prairie spirits, so they would let them pass. "What spirits?" I asked, feeling goosebumps run down my spine. His words fell on the fertile ground of my fear and disorientation. Different kinds. Some are in the stones, some are in the wind, and then there are the oldest ones, those who came with the first people across the land bridge. They feed on the lost, the strayed, those who run without knowing where. Their fear, it's sweeter than honey to them. He turned to me, and for a moment something ancient and predatory flickered in his eyes. "They collect debts, Luke. Debts you don't even know you owe. A toll for passage, a debt for a life lived wrong. They appear to those on the edge. Like you are now." I shrank in my seat. Paranoia washed over me. This man, if it was a man, knew too much. His appearance was impossible. His calm was inhuman. "Where's your car?" I almost shouted. "You said it broke down." "It's nearby." He waved a hand towards the fog. "You can't see it, but it's there." Like many other things, he stood up. "Your car can't be fixed, but I can tow you to the nearest town. I have a cable." The thought of staying with him in this fragile metal box alone with the fog and his stories was unbearable. But the thought of going somewhere with him in his unseen car was even more terrifying. "No, thank you. I'll wait until morning. Maybe someone will drive by." Eli tilted his head. "By morning it will be too late. They are already here. They are waiting. They like it when the prey makes its own choice." He paused and added almost in a whisper, "They whisper your thoughts to me, Luke. About the debts you haven't paid. About the man you betrayed. About the family you left behind." Ice-cold horror gripped me. He knew everything. I'd told no one about how I'd failed my partner, leaving him alone to deal with the fallout of my scam project. I had run from it like a coward. "Shut up," I hissed. "Silence is an answer too," said Eli. "They perceive it as agreement." He stepped away from the car and dissolved into the fog. I sat, unable to move, listening to the beat of my own heart. Minutes passed, each feeling like an eternity. The fog outside the window thickened, and I began to see flickers within its whiteness. The same horned shadows I'd seen before the crash. They were tall, unnaturally thin, and moved in jerks, like in an old silent horror film. Suddenly, there was a metallic screech from behind. I flinched and looked in the rearview mirror. An old, rusty truck with no markings slowly emerged from the fog. It stopped behind my Honda. Eli got out of the cab. In his hands was a tow cable. "Decided," he said, attaching the cable to my car. His voice was no longer polite. It held a commanding note. "We're leaving." "Where to?" I asked, feeling fear turn into despair. "To the place of debt payment," came the simple reply. He finished with the cable and approached my window. "Don't try to get out. The doors are locked now, from the inside and the outside." He returned to his truck. The engine growled and my Honda jerked, righting itself on its wheels with a terrible scraping sound. We slowly crept forward into the white gloom. The journey became pure hell. Eli's truck dragged me across off-road terrain. I felt the undercarriage of my car scraping over stones and thorns. The fog didn't lift. It only grew denser. At times I saw lights in it, A lone light in the distance, something resembling an illuminated farmhouse window. But we never turned towards them. We moved away from any hint of civilization. Eli sometimes turned on the radio in his cab. I caught snippets of old songs, but more often just static and strange whispering voices that echoed his stories. I heard my name spoken in an unfamiliar language. I tried pressing the brake harder, but the pedal sank to the floor unfeelingly. The gearshift lever wouldn't move. I was a passenger in my own car, being towed into the unknown by my personal Karen. How long did we drive? An hour? 2? 5? Time lost all meaning. I slipped into a semi-conscious state, tormented by thirst, pain, and fear. I began to see faces in the fog, distorted, suffering faces of other travelers this road had consumed before me. Finally, the truck stopped. The fog began to slowly dissipate, and I saw where I had been brought. We were on the edge of a vast field, stretching into the darkness. But it was no ordinary field. It was littered with hundreds, thousands of rusty, wrecked cars from different eras. A giant junkyard, a cemetery of automobiles lost in the heart of the prairie. The moon, breaking through the clouds, cast a pale light on the twisted metal, like the bones of prehistoric animals. Eli got out of the truck and approached me. He detached the cable. "Get out," he said. His face was no longer indifferent. It showed anticipation, hunger. "No," I groaned, pressing myself into the seat. "Your debt must be paid. You ran from your life. Now it is here." He gestured towards the sea of scrap metal. "Here are the lives of all who ran. They serve now. Maintain the balance." He didn't break the glass. He simply looked at the door handle. A quiet click sounded and the door opened by itself. The cold prairie air rushed into the cabin, carrying the smell of rust, dust, and decay. I didn't want to get out, but something made me, some force more powerful than my own fear. I felt my legs moving on their own. I got out and stood swaying, staring at this unimaginable graveyard, and then I saw them. They emerged from behind the crumpled shells of cars. Tall, skinny figures, more like walking trees than people. Their heads were crowned with massive, bizarre horns, like twisted roots or petrified winds. Their faces were devoid of features, only dark hollows where eyes should be. These were the very shadows from the roadside. One of them approached me. It was taller than the others. It didn't walk. It floated above the ground, its long branch-like fingers reaching for me. Eli stood aside, watching. An expression of almost religious reverence was frozen on his face. The spirit came close. It emitted the same sweetish, musty smell as Eli. It leaned in, and its face was inches from mine. I saw no eyes, but I felt its gaze upon me, ancient, bottomless, full of knowledge of all my sins and weaknesses. It didn't speak a word, but a voice sounded in my head. It wasn't one voice, but a chorus of thousands of whispers merging into one. "The flight is over. Your road has led you to us. Now your debt is to become part of the road. Your longing, your fear, your betrayal. They will nourish us, and you will stand guard, guide other lost ones, like the one who brought you." I looked at Eli, and I understood everything. His car, which couldn't be seen, his knowledge, his impassivity. He was like me, once. He was one of the previous travelers taken for debts. Now he served them, bringing a new victim to postpone his own reckoning, or perhaps to sate the eternal hunger he now shared. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The long, cold fingers of the spirit touched my forehead. The pain wasn't physical. It was a sensation of complete emptiness. I felt all my memories, all my fears, all my regrets being drawn out of me. My life flashed before my eyes like a film reel, being erased frame by frame. Only one emotion remained, longing, an endless, all-consuming longing. My vision blurred. The colors of the world faded, turned gray. I looked at my Honda. It already seemed alien to me, just another metal coffin in this graveyard. And then I saw it, far to the east, on a barely visible dirt road leading to the junkyard. A lone pair of headlights flickered. Another traveler. Lost. Running. And I felt not hunger, not thirst, but a quiet, persistent urge. A debt. I needed to meet him. Help him. Explain that he needed help. Eli approached me. His face was familiar now, almost kin. "Now you understand," he said soundlessly, his words imprinting directly onto my consciousness. "The flight always ends here. The circle must be closed," I nodded. No fear remained in me, only a cold, lifeless emptiness and the knowledge of the road. I looked at the approaching headlights. I could already see the driver's face, frightened, confused. He was in a hurry. He was running from something. I took a step forward. My movements were smooth, unnatural. My skin had a pale, lunar glow. "You look like you need help," I whispered soundlessly, practicing. The words came easily. They had been waiting for their time for many years. The headlights burned 2 blinding tunnels into the night. The car, some old battered SUV, slowly rolled along the dirt track and stopped about 20 meters from me. The engine died. In the ensuing silence, only the rustle of dry wormwood in the wind and the rapid, metronomic beat of my new cold heart could be heard. I stood motionless, letting the headlights wash over me. I knew how I looked in his eyes. A pale, confused man, frozen on the edge of this sea of scrap metal. A crash victim, just like I had once been. Like Eli had been. The SUV's door opened with a protesting creak. A young guy, about 25, got out. His face was scared and tired, his clothes wrinkled. He didn't see Eli or the shadows. They had dissolved into the darkness, become part of the landscape. His world had now narrowed to me in this giant junkyard that had appeared in the middle of nowhere. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted, hesitant to come closer. Fear and uncertainty were audible in his voice. I took a step towards him, my movements surprisingly fluid, devoid of human restlessness. I felt every stone under my feet, every gust of wind, not as sensations but as data, information. "I think so," I replied, and my voice sounded alien, muffled, with a slight hoarseness that hadn't been there before. "Got lost." Car stalled. He approached, cautiously looking around. His eyes widened as he fully comprehended the scale of the car cemetery stretching into the night. "Jesus. What is this place?" he whispered. "Safe," I said, repeating the words I had once heard myself. They came on their own, like a learned mantra. "For a while. Are you alone?" The guy nodded, still not taking his eyes off the rusty shells. "Yeah, driving to Denver. GPS reset. I took a wrong turn somewhere. I think I've been circling here for hours." He looked at me. "I'm Zach." "Luke," I responded. The name sounded like an echo from another world. I felt his story without even listening. It hung around him like a trail. The smell of cheap beer, the fear of failure, anger at someone whose face flickered in his memory. He had run away. From a fight with his girlfriend, from work problems. An ordinary gray human drama, perfect sustenance for the shadows. "I have a first aid kit," I said, recalling the script. "And water." In the car, I turned and walked towards my Honda, knowing he would follow. Such was the nature of the lost. They clung to any semblance of help. My steps were soundless. I no longer left footprints on the dusty ground. Zach followed me, his breathing rapid and uneven. He peered into the cabin of my car, saw the crumpled dashboard, the cracked windshield. Nasty crash. "You got really lucky." "Yes," I agreed. "I was lucky to find this place." I opened the door and took a bottle of water from the glove compartment. The bottle was cold, even though there was no air conditioning in the car. I handed it to him. He greedily put it to his lips, taking big gulps. I watched his Adam's apple bob. Warm scarlet life flowed in his veins. Inside me there was only silence and a faint hum emanating from the junkyard. The hum of thousands of souls trapped here. "Thanks," he exhaled, wiping his mouth. I was starting to think I'd go crazy. No lights, no people, just this goddamn prairie. "It's not just prairie here," I said quietly. "These lands are old. They have memory." He looked at me with slight bewilderment, but the fear of loneliness was stronger. "We need to do something about the car. I have a cable. Maybe we can try to start it." Or he trailed off, looking at my hopelessly damaged Honda. "Mine can't be fixed," I stated, "but I can help you. I know the way from here." Hope flared in his eyes, just as bright and naive as mine had once been. "Really?" You know how to get back to the highway. I know where all roads from here lead, I answered honestly. At that moment, something loud fell deep within the junkyard with a clang and a crash. Zach flinched and turned sharply. What was that? Maybe there's someone there. Knocked over by the wind, I said indifferently. Or those who came before us. They won't harm you. They just wait. Wait for what? He asked, his voice trembling. I looked at him with my new seeing eyes. I saw his fear like a purple haze around him. I felt his longing like a sweetish scent. Deliverance, I replied. Or company. I took a step towards his SUV. Let's go. I'll show you the way. You'll ride with me? Uncertainty crept back into his voice. I will guide you, I said. It was the truth. I no longer needed a car. I had become part of the road. I could walk alongside and my feet knew no fatigue. He hesitated for only a second. The fear of being left alone in this eerie place outweighed the vague suspicions. He nodded and headed for the driver's door. I walked to the passenger side and got in. The smell was different. The smell of a living person, sweat, deodorant, old food. It was sharp, almost painful to my heightened senses. Zach started the engine. The gearshift lever trembled in his hand. Which way? He asked, looking at me in the semi-darkness of the cabin. I pointed my hand forward, in the direction opposite to where he had come from. Towards where the flat terrain gave way to low hills. That way. Follow the old track. It will lead us out of here. He started moving and the SUV slowly crawled along the edge of the giant junkyard. I sat motionless, looking ahead. I wasn't the driver. I was the guide, the pilot leading the ship to its final berth. Thanks, man, Zach said, breaking the oppressive silence. I thought I was done for. Without you, I'd probably be circling until morning and then... I don't know. Don't mention it, I replied. We're all looking for the way. It's just that not all roads lead where we want to go. We drove for several minutes. The junkyard was left behind, hidden by the night and the hills. But I knew we weren't driving away from it. We were moving in a spiral, approaching the center, the place of power. Listen, what was that you said earlier about the memory of the land? Zach asked, trying to drown his inattention with conversation. Spirits of the prairie, I said, and the words flowed easily, as if someone else was speaking through my mouth. They are ancient. They collect debts from those who get lost, from those who run, he laughed nervously. Sounds like a tourist tale. All tales are born from truth, I objected. You are running, Zach, from Jessica, from your student debts. You think everything will start anew in Denver? The car jerked sharply. He hit the brakes. How do you know about Jessica? He whispered, looking at me with growing horror. I slowly turned my head towards him. The moonlight fell on my face and I saw his own face contort with fear. He saw what was hidden behind the mask of Luke, the void, the cold. They whispered to me, I said simply. They know all your thoughts. Your fear is food for them. And your betrayal. Jessica waited for you at the cafe and you didn't show. You got in the car and drove away, didn't even answer her calls. To them, that's a debt, unpaid. Shut up, he yelled, recoiling towards the door. Who are you? I am your hitchhiker, I answered. And we have arrived. Suddenly, the engine died. The headlights went out. We were again in complete silence and darkness. But this wasn't the same darkness. It was thicker, saturated. Gasping with horror, Zach tried to start the car again. The starter turned over with a dry, fruitless clicking sound, and then they appeared from the darkness outside the window, tall, horned shadows. There were many of them. They slowly surrounded the SUV, sliding soundlessly over the ground. Their featureless faces were turned towards us. Zach made a sound halfway between a moan and a sob. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. What is that? What is that? He screamed. The masters of this land, I said, opening the door. Cold air rushed into the cabin. And your new masters? No. He tried to grab my arm but snatched his back as if from fire. My skin was icy. I got out of the car and stood beside the shadows. I was one of them, part of the landscape, part of the ritual. One of the spirits, the tallest, approached the car. Its branch-like fingers touched the glass on the driver's side. The glass didn't crack. It simply fogged over, covered with frost. The door opened by itself. Zach wasn't pulled out by force. He stepped out himself. His movements were stiff, his face frozen in a mask of absolute all-consuming terror. But his legs carried him forward, towards the spirit. I watched as the process repeated. Long fingers touched the forehead, a quiet, hopeless sigh, and then emptiness. The light in his eyes went out, replaced by the same icy, lifeless void that was in me. When it was over, he stood, swaying, staring into nothingness. His SUV was now just another metal tombstone. Eli materialized beside me from the darkness. "The circle is closed," he uttered soundlessly. "You are a full guardian now. You understand your purpose." I nodded. I understood. The pain, the fear, the doubts, all were gone. Only a quiet, cold certainty remained. I was a guide, a catcher of souls. I was part of the eternal cycle of the road. I looked at Zach, or at what he had become. His eyes slowly turned towards me. There was no hatred in them. There was nothing, only knowledge. Somewhere far away on the horizon, headlights flickered again. Another little light, another lost soul, another dead. Eli looked at me and gave an almost imperceptible nod. An invitation, permission. I took a step forward towards the lonely lights. My movements were smooth and soundless. A calm, indifferent expression froze on my face. I was ready to meet the next hitchhiker. The second story, one way. Our camper van broke down on a dirt road somewhere in Arizona, just as the sun had set, leaving only a bloody smear on the horizon. I turned on the headlights, and they illuminated a sign out of the darkness. One-way road. Only one vehicle enters per night. Behind us, in the pitch black, another car's headlights flicked on. It was approaching, fast. "Layla, buckle up," I shouted, desperately twisting the ignition key. The old Ford we'd been traveling in for the past 2 weeks responded only with a wheezing, sputtering cough from the engine. A death on wheels. The irony would have been funny if not for the growing roar of the engine behind us. "What's wrong, Mark? What does that sign mean?" Layla's voice trembled. She was staring into the side mirror, her fingers digging into the leather upholstery. I turned the key again. The engine coughed, roared for a second, and died once more. "It won't start, damn it." The headlights behind us were now flooding the camper's interior with a blinding white light. They were too bright, almost unnatural. I expected the car to speed past us, leaving us looking like fools, but instead it slammed on its brakes, stopping a couple of meters from our bumper. It was a huge old pickup truck, the color of rust, with a raised hood that looked like a snarling maw. A tall man in a cowboy hat got out. His face was hidden in shadow, but his shoulders spoke of silent strength. He walked slowly to my window. I rolled it down, feeling the cold night air rush into the cabin. "Trouble?" His voice was hollow, emotionless. "Yeah, it won't start." I squeezed out. "Could you help? Maybe push, or didn't you read the sign?" He interrupted. His eyes finally caught the light from the dashboard. They were pale blue, almost transparent like ice. There wasn't a drop of concern in them. "What sign? The one about one-way traffic?" "That's nonsense." "It's not nonsense," he shook his head. "It's the rule. One car per night. Only one makes it to the end." Layla swallowed nervously. "What does makes it mean? What happens to the others?" The cowboy slowly turned to her. "The night rider catches them. Or it. No one knows for sure. But if you're not first, you're a road sign. Or rather, what's left of you." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. A maniac. We'd run into a maniac in the middle of nowhere. "Listen, we don't want any trouble. Take your road. We'll just wait here until morning." The cowboy smirked, and it was scarier than any threat. "No one waits until morning. The road opens at sunset and closes at dawn. If you're on it after sunset, you're in the race. Whether you want to be or not. Your car broke down on the starting line. Unlucky." He looked at his watch. "You've got 5 minutes, no more. Then it will come out." "Who?" Layla nearly shrieked. "The rider," the cowboy repeated, as if that explained everything. "It doesn't like to be kept waiting. I suggest you fix your car, or run. Running is useless, but instinct takes over." With those words, he turned and walked back to his pickup. A moment later, his engine roared to life and he sped off, leaving us in a cloud of dust and all-consuming fear. "Mark, he's a psycho, right?" Layla looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. He's just trying to scare us. I tried to start the engine again. Silence. Absolute. It seemed even the battery had finally died. I hit the steering wheel with my palm. Damn it. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Suddenly, from behind in the direction we'd come from came a distant sound. Not the roar of an engine. It was a low vibrating hum, like a huge industrial generator. It grew, filling the space, pressing us into our seats. I looked in the rearview mirror. There, in the utter darkness, a single light ignited, dim reddish like a hot coal. It was far away, but approaching at an incredible speed. "Oh God," whispered Layla. "It's him." Instinct shut off my brain and pumped pure adrenaline. I jumped out of the camper. "Quick, run!" We dashed forward, along the gravel shoulder under the starlight that suddenly seemed mocking and cold. Our feet sank into the dust, our hearts hammered against our ribs. I looked back. The red light was much closer now. The hum had turned into a deafening roar that sounded not of metal, but of something organic, hungry. It wasn't just driving on the road, it was devouring it, leaving behind a trail of absolute blackness where even the starlight died. "Don't look back." "Run!" I screamed, pulling Layla by the hand. We ran, gasping for air, our lungs burning. Ahead, in the distance, the lights of the pickup truck flickered. The cowboy was right. He was first. He was winning this hellish race. Suddenly, the roar behind us ceased. It became quiet, too quiet. We slowed down, trying to catch our breath. I risked a look. The red light was motionless, about 100 meters from our abandoned camper. It just glowed, pulsating like a heart. It seemed to be examining its prey. "It stopped," sobbed Layla. "Maybe it won't touch us if we leave on foot?" No sooner had she spoken than the red light surged forward, but not towards us. It slammed into our camper at full speed. There was no sound of metal crashing. There was a sound of tearing fabric, crunching, a dull, squelching noise. The red light enveloped the Ford, consumed it. After a few seconds, the light was gone, and the camper was gone too. In its place was only a pile of crumpled, melted metal, more like the chewed-up remains of a large animal. A thin column of black, oily smoke rose from it into the sky, and that red eye ignited again, and slowly, relentlessly turned in our direction. It saw us. "Run!" I yelled, and we again threw ourselves forward, gripped by animal terror. We ran, not watching the path. Thorns snagged our jeans, stones dug into our soles. The hum behind us grew again, but now it was different, satisfied, playful. It knew it would catch us. It was only a matter of time. Ahead, to the left of the road, I saw a dark silhouette. A saloon. An old, dilapidated building with a crooked sign that read, "The Last Resort." In front of it were several cars from different eras, from a rusty 50s Cadillac to a relatively modern sedan. They were all dead, covered in dust and cobwebs. "There." I pulled Layla towards the building. We burst inside, slamming the heavy wooden door behind us. It smelled of dust, whiskey, and fear. Inside the saloon, lit by the dim light of kerosene lamps, people were sitting. About 7 of them. They sat at tables, not speaking, staring into their glasses. When we entered, they all slowly turned their heads towards us. Their faces were pale, their eyes empty. These were the faces of people who had seen hell and resigned themselves to it. The bartender, a burly man with a face etched with scars, stood behind the counter. "Newcomers," he stated in a disinterested tone. "Made it before midnight. Lucky. What is this place?" I exhaled, leaning against the door. The roaring from outside was getting closer. "Sanctuary," said the bartender. "The only one on this road. Works on the same rules. 1 vehicle per night makes it to the end. The rest wait for the next night, or until the rider decides the sanctuary is overcrowded." Layla looked at the inhabitants of the saloon in horror. "They're all stuck here." "We're all stuck here, dear." A hoarse voice came from the corner. An elderly woman in a tattered dress was smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. "Some for a week, some longer. Waiting for our turn to be first." "But how is the turn decided?" I asked. "Lottery." The bartender pulled an old leather pouch from under the counter. "Every morning at dawn when the road closes, the one who draws the black marker drives the next evening. The rest wait." The roar outside reached a climax and just as suddenly died down. Red light poured through the dusty windows, flooding the room with a crimson glow. It had stopped right outside the saloon. No one moved. The people just sat, heads bowed like condemned prisoners awaiting their fate. "Won't it come in here?" whispered Layla. "Rules," said the bartender. "The sanctuary is neutral territory. Unless you break a rule. No going out after sunset, no loud noises after midnight, and no trying to leave out of turn." The red light remained for a few more minutes, emitting a silent threat. Then it went out, and the hum of the engine began to fade away. It had left. The hunt was over for tonight. The cowboys' pickup had won. Someone in the saloon exhaled in relief. The tension eased slightly. "Sit down," said the elderly woman. "You're new. The first night is the hardest. My name is Edna." We sat down at her table. We were brought glasses of water. My hands were still shaking. "What is that thing?" I asked. "No one knows," said Edna, taking a drag. "It's older than this road." "And this road?" "It's always been here. The Indians said it was a spirit trail. They said it was the border between worlds. Then the white men came, laid down the gravel, put up signs. Angered what lived here, and it set its rules. But why only one car? Why such cruelty?" "Because it's more fun." The bartender laughed hoarsely, wiping a glass. "It feeds on fear, despair. And what could be tastier than making people fight for their lives, knowing that your salvation is someone else's death? It's the perfect hunt." And so our new life began, a life in hell by the rules. We saw the dawn without closing our eyes. With the first rays of the sun, the bartender, whose name was Frank, brought out the leather pouch. It contained wooden tokens. All but one were light. One was black. All the inhabitants of the last resort, including Layla and me, lined up. One by one, they approached and drew a token. I saw hope on their faces, which died when a light disc ended up in their palm. It was Edna's turn. She drew a light one. Her shoulders slumped. My turn. I reached into the pouch. My heart was pounding in my throat. I pulled out a token. It was warm and light. Only Layla remained. She looked at me in horror. She was last. The black token was waiting for her. "No," she whispered. "I can't." "You can," Frank said sternly. "Rules, you drive today. At dawn, we'll roll out the 70 Chevy for you. It's the fastest of what we have." Layla started shaking. I hugged her. "I'll be with you. We'll go together." "The rules say one vehicle." Frank objected. "There can be only one person in the car, otherwise, you know what will happen." It was the longest day of my life. We sat with Layla clinging to each other as the sun rose and set. She cried. I tried to be strong, but inside I was turning to ice. I offered to take her place, but Frank shook his head. "The lottery is the law. Break it, and the rider will come for everyone." As the sun began to set, painting the sky crimson, the old blue Chevrolet was rolled out in front of the saloon. Edna shoved a small amulet, a crooked horseshoe, into Layla's hand. "Stay on the road, kid. Don't turn off. And don't look back. Never look back." Layla got behind the wheel. Her face was wet with tears, but there was determination in her eyes. She looked at me. "I love you, Mark. I love you." I kissed her through the window. "I'll find you." "I promise." She nodded, started the engine. The motor coughed and rumbled to life. In the distance, at the opposite end of the road, the red light ignited. The race was beginning. Layla pressed the gas. The Chevrolet shot forward. We all stood and watched as her taillights receded until they dissolved in the twilight, and then we waited. An hour passed. 2. A oppressive silence hung in the saloon. Suddenly, Frank, who was looking through an old pair of field glasses, let out a hoarse breath. "She's almost at the finish line. I can see the lights of the end point." For a moment, hope flared in my heart. "She did it! She—" Suddenly, a soul-rending sound came from the road. The screech of brakes, followed by that same terrible, wet crunch. Frank slowly lowered the binoculars. His face was stone. She looked back. God damn it, she looked back. I collapsed to my knees. The world went black. I could hear Edna crying softly. Layla had lost, but the hell didn't end there. It had only just begun. The next morning, there was a new lottery. I drew the black marker. Now I'm sitting behind the wheel of the old Cadillac. The key is in the ignition. The sun is setting, painting the desert the color of blood. Somewhere ahead is the end point. Freedom. And behind me, in the advancing darkness, a single red light has just ignited. It's approaching. Fast. But I'm not afraid for myself. I'm afraid for those I'm leaving behind in the last resort. I'm afraid of what I'll become if I survive. Because the rule is simple. Only one car can travel the road each night. And to live, I need to kill the hope of everyone else. I turn the key. The engine starts with a low rumble. I look in the mirror at the burning red eye and whisper the only prayer I have left. Don't look back. And I press the gas. The third story. In 500 feet, turn left onto rural Route 17. The female voice in the navigator was calm, as always. I obeyed, even though I was sure it was the wrong way. The map on the screen showed absolute emptiness, a thin gray line winding through a dense, impenetrable green mass. I had turned off Highway 101, escaping a sudden, furious downpour that had turned the asphalt into a murky mirror and visibility into a joke. The navigator, my old reliable Horizon Navi, my faithful companion on countless business trips, had suggested this shortcut. Now I understood that the shortest route isn't always the best. The wind howled, rocking my sedan, and the branches of old pines scraped against the roof like bony fingers. I increased the speed of the wipers, but they only smeared the watery gruel across the windshield. A minute later, the voice again, make a U-turn when possible. I looked at the screen in bewilderment. We were on a narrow, broken road. There was no shoulder, just a ditch filled with brown water. Making a U-turn here was physically impossible. For what reason? I asked aloud, stupidly hoping the device supported voice commands. It never had. The navigator was silent. I drove another 100 meters, hoping for a wider spot. There was none. The road narrowed. The trees closed in overhead, forming a gloomy tunnel. The feeling of anxiety, until then muted by fatigue from the long drive, began to grow into a lump in my throat. Half a mile later, stop, he is already close. I slammed on the brakes. The tires slid through the mud, spinning the car sideways. My heart was pounding in my ears. I peered into the pitch darkness beyond the headlights. Nothing. Only slanting sheets of rain and trees bending in the wind. He? Who? I asked the silence in the cabin, and my own voice sounded pathetic and lost. The navigator was silent. The distance traveled arrow on the screen froze. The icon of my car stood in the middle of nowhere. And then it spoke again, but it was a different voice now, hoarse and panicked, full of genuine terror. Run! I jerked, instinctively reaching for the ignition key to turn off the engine. The silence that followed the howling wind and the noise of the engine was deafening. I sat there gripping the wheel and listened. Only rain, only wind, and the ticking of the cooling engine. Slowly, as if afraid to wake something, I turned to the navigator. The screen was clear. The map had disappeared. Only one message was displayed in large red letters. Don't look back. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Was this someone's prank, a hack? But I was in the middle of a remote forest. The signal had been lost back on the highway. I reached for the device's power button. My finger froze an inch from the plastic. If I turn it off, I'll get lost and die, raced through my head. That thought was distinctly rational. But another, more ancient and powerful one whispered, if you stay, you'll die even faster. Suddenly, the navigator came to life again. The female voice returned, but there was a metallic, inhuman note in it now. Continue straight ahead. In 200 yards, turn. Next instruction in 300 yards. I didn't move. Paralysis of fear gripped my muscles. Who are you? I squeezed out. The screen changed again. The red letters were replaced by pale blue ones, like text typed on an old electronic typewriter. My name is Lisa. I also took a wrong turn. He caught me 3 days ago. He is in the roads. He is in the system. He is listening. The blood drained from my face. I looked at the date on the car's clock. October 3rd. The message supposedly from Lisa was dated October 1st. That's impossible, I whispered. Everything is possible. New text appeared. He drifts in the ether. He catches the lost. I want to help. I'm trying to fight him, but he is stronger. Please listen to me." The voice became female again, but now it sounded tearful with real living panic. "Drive now. He knows you're here. He's coming down the road." I took off without thinking. The sedan roared, the wheels spun in the mud but then gripped something firmly. I raced forward along this hellish path. The road twisted, went down, then up again. I saw nothing but the illuminated patch of asphalt ahead. My head pounded. He is in the system. He is in the roads. In 1 mile, a fork. "Keep to the right," Lisa's voice commanded. I sped, barely controlling the car. Suddenly, the navigator emitted a piercing click, and the female voice was replaced by a low, guttural one, full of unspeakable malice. It was a voice from nightmares. "Stop! Surrender! The road is thirsty!" I floored the gas pedal. "Lisa!" I screamed. The screen flickered. The voice became female again, but barely audible, breaking as if she were being strangled. "Don't listen to him. It's a lie. Turn left at the fork. There's an old bridge." I approached the fork. The right road seemed wider and better maintained. The left one was a broken dirt road disappearing into blackness. Instinct screamed, "Right." But Lisa's hoarse whisper pleaded, "Left. Trust me." A second to think. I turned the wheel left. The car bounced over potholes. The exhaust pipe scraped against stones. The navigator let out a deafening screech, and the monster's voice growled, "Your choice. You're void." And then Lisa again, weaker than before. "Well done. Now drive. Don't turn anywhere until you see the lights." I drove on, feeling the madness creeping up on me. I was talking to a ghost in my car, who was fighting another nameless horror woven into the very fabric of this place. The road led to an old, half-ruined wooden bridge. It creaked and sagged under the weight of the car. A river swollen from the rain raged below. "Drive across quickly," Lisa whispered. I accelerated. The planks cracked. It seemed the bridge was about to collapse. But I shot out onto the other bank, and then I saw them. In the distance, through the curtain of rain, weak lights flickered. They seemed to be the lights of some building. "Thank you," I said to the navigator. In response, there was only a quiet, bitter laugh. It wasn't Lisa's voice laughing now, nor the monster's. It was a third voice. "Tired, doomed. Don't thank me. We're just swapping places." The screen went dark, completely. I drove up to the lights. It was an abandoned gas station, an old brick house with broken windows, with a sign barely hanging on. Station number 17. I turned off the engine and sat there, trembling, unable to get out. What did swapping places mean? I looked at the navigator. It was dead. I tried to turn it on, nothing. I decided to go into the building. Maybe there were people there, a phone, anything. The door creaked. It smelled of mold and decay. Junk was scattered on the floor. And then in the corner I saw it. An old monitor, one of those thick CRT ones. It had a static image of a map, and right in the middle of the map, on rural Route 17, a red dot was blinking, and under the monitor on a dusty table lay a logbook. I moved closer. It was the gas station's log. The last entry was dated October 1st. The customer's name, Lisa M. The car model, a sedan, exactly like mine. I recoiled. So she had been here. She really had been here. And she, what, became part of the system? Suddenly the monitor blinked. From the built-in speaker came the familiar female voice, but now it was filled with a soul-chilling calmness. The very same calmness with which it all began. System rebooted. Welcome, new guide. Search for the lost activated. I rushed to the car. I turned the ignition. The dashboard lit up, but the Horizon Navi navigator did not. It was dead. But when I started moving and tried to drive back onto the road, I realized I couldn't. All paths led back to rural Route 17. I circled the deserted roads around the gas station like a fly around a lamp. Each time returning to this cursed place, despair gripped me. I went back into the building, grabbed the logbook, and started flipping through it. Names, dates, over several years. They were all dated around the 1st of the month, and they all disappeared. I found an old newspaper clipping tucked between the pages. The mystery of Highway 101, missing persons near the rural routes. The article talked about dozens of people who had disappeared over the past 20 years. They were all last seen at station number 17. I understood everything. This wasn't just a ghost. It was a trap, a place of power for some entity, a spirit of the roads that fed on lost travelers. In the navigation system, it had become its tool. It catches them, lures them here, and the last victim becomes the bait for the next one. Lisa wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to save herself by finding a replacement. And she succeeded. Night fell. The rain didn't let up. I sat in the car at the abandoned gas station, listening to the wind howling through the broken windows. And suddenly lights flashed on the dashboard. The navigator screen lit up, but now there was no map on it. There was my face taken by the rearview camera. I looked haggard and frightened, and then my own voice came from the speakers, but distorted, recorded several hours ago. In 500 feet, turn left onto rural Route 17. I screamed and started hitting the dashboard, trying to tear the device out, but it was built in too securely. The voice continued, calm and confident. Make a U-turn when possible. I jumped out of the car and ran into the forest, away from the road, away from this place. The branches lashed my face, water squelched in my shoes. I ran, not choosing a path, hoping for only one thing, to never see asphalt again. But after maybe an hour of wandering through the wet forest, I saw a gap ahead. Grey, dim but familiar. I emerged onto the shoulder. In front of me was a road, that same rural Route 17. And on the opposite side, like a mockery, stood my car, still at station number 17. I hadn't moved an inch. I had just been running in a circle. A rustle came from the forest behind me. Not the wind, not the rain. It was the sound of something heavy and wet, dragging across the wet ground. I slowly turned around. There, in the darkness between the trees, stood a figure, tall, dark, with no clear outlines. It seemed woven from shadow and mud, and from it came a smell of old gasoline, wet asphalt, and something dead. I retreated onto the road, my heart ready to jump out of my chest. The figure didn't move, just watched, and then, in the silence of the night, from the open door of my car, came a voice. My voice, which now sounded from the navigator. It was quiet, but perfectly clear, without distortion. "He is already close," said my own voice. I looked at the figure. It took a step forward, emerging from the shadow of the trees onto the shoulder, and I saw that it wasn't quite a figure. It was something resembling a human, but its skin was as if worn away, like the rubber on an old tire, and instead of a face, there was only a dent, without eyes, without a mouth. "Run!" My voice screamed from the car, and in that scream was genuine, my own not yet recorded horror. But there was nowhere to run. The road went both ways into nothingness, into darkness. The forest was its territory. The gas station was its trap. The creature took another step. Its worn-out feet made no sound on the wet asphalt. I retreated until my back was against the cold metal of my car. The navigator in the cabin spoke again, but now it was that same hoarse, panicked voice I had heard at the very beginning. The voice of the one who was before Lisa, and before someone else. The chain was lost in the past. "I'm sorry," the hoarse voice whispered. The creature reached out its hand. Its fingers were long and smooth like softened asphalt. It touched my forehead, and the world went dark. I opened my eyes. I was sitting behind the wheel. The rain was still pouring. I was driving on Highway 101, escaping the downpour. A map glowed on the navigator screen. The calm female voice said, "In 500 feet, turn left onto rural Route 17. I obeyed. Even though I was sure it was the wrong way, I had no choice. I was the new voice in the navigator, and I could already see the lonely lights of someone's headlights in the distance. A new target, a new victim. To lure them here to my old gas station, I had to speak, guide them. First scare them, then offer salvation. Find a replacement. I looked at the screen. A cursor was blinking there, waiting for my first word. I typed it, and my voice, already recorded, distorted, sounded in the cabin of someone else's car. Make a U-turn when possible. The chain continued. The road was thirsty. The fourth story. When my old Mustang broke down on a deserted forest road in the Appalachians, I was already mentally preparing for a night in the woods. The sun had almost disappeared behind the ridges. staining the sky crimson, and long, ugly shadows from the pines stretched across the asphalt like tentacles. My phone had no signal, and the trunk held nothing but a spare tire and an old blanket. Nothing to make the coming hours of waiting easier. I got out, kicked the hopelessly silent car's rubber bumper, and lit a cigarette, trying to suppress my rising panic. The thought of having to spend the night here, in this echoing silent forest, made my blood run cold. But then, through an incredible stroke of luck, yellow flashing lights appeared in my rearview mirror just 5 minutes later. The relief I felt was so sharp it made me dizzy. I turned around. A tow truck was slowly approaching. It was old, rusty, the color of faded mud. There was no company name, no phone number, just worn patches on the sides where stickers had once been. Strange, but in that moment, it sparked nothing but gratitude for my unbelievable luck. The tow truck stopped behind my Mustang. The driver's door creaked open and a man got out. Tall, stooped, wearing a greasy work jacket and a cap pulled down over his eyebrows. He didn't say a word, didn't nod, didn't make any sign. He just walked to the back of the truck, lowered the winch with quick, practiced movements, and hooked up my car. The sound of metal on metal was unpleasant, but welcome. "Hey," I shouted, walking closer. "Thank God you're here. I didn't call for a tow, I didn't even have time. No service." He finished fiddling with the hook and turned around. His face was gaunt, etched with deep wrinkles, and his eyes held a vacant, glassy stare. He smiled. It was a wide, unnatural smile, revealing sparse yellow teeth. "I know," he replied in a raspy, smoke-scarred voice, and a large tire iron glinted in his hand. He held it not like a tool, but like a club. My slight confusion was replaced by an icy terror that hit me with such force, my knees buckled for a second. I staggered back. "Hey man, what is this, a joke?" "Joke," he repeated, and his smile widened. He took a step forward. I retreated toward my car door, instinctively seeking shelter. "Money?" "Take my wallet! Take the car!" I was almost shrieking, fumbling in my pockets. He shook his head, still smiling. "Ain't about that. Get in the cab." The tire iron in his hand was a persuasive argument. I glanced at the dark, impenetrable forest. "Run in there?" That was suicide. Here on the road there was at least a chance. Or was that just naive hope? Slowly, as if in a dream, I moved towards the tow truck's cab. He followed close behind, his breath audible at my back, heavy, wheezing. I climbed into the passenger seat. The cab smelled of sweat, gasoline, and something sweetly rotten. He slammed the door behind me, walked around the truck, and got behind the wheel. He placed the tire iron on the seat between us. The engine roared to life, and we started moving. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "Home," he grunted shortly, not looking at me. We drove in complete silence. I stared out the side window at the passing tree trunks, which now seemed like a palisade separating me from the world of the living. My Mustang, helplessly dangling from the hook, swayed in front of the windshield, a symbol of my total loss of control. I tried to discreetly feel for the door handle. The lock was popped up. "Wouldn't," the driver said without turning his head. It was as if he could read my thoughts. We turned off the asphalt road onto a dirt track that was more like a tractor path. The truck bounced over potholes, branches whipping against the glass. In the darkness ahead, a dim light began to appear. Through the thicket, I saw the outline of a structure. It wasn't a house, but more of a shack, cobbled together from scrap wood and rusty corrugated iron. Next to it sat another, even older tow truck missing its wheels, and several disassembled car skeletons resembling prehistoric remains. The tow truck stopped right in front of the house. On the porch, illuminated by a single bare bulb, stood a woman, as thin as the driver, in a dirty dress. She was holding a bloody hatchet, whittling a stick with it. She looked at our truck without a hint of surprise. "Get out," my companion commanded, picking up the tire iron again. I got out. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of copper, damp earth, and decay. The woman on the porch grinned. "A new one, Earl?" she shouted. "New one, Mabel," Earl answered. He shoved me in the back with the tire iron toward the door. "Go on in. Be our guest." The door creaked open, releasing a wave of that same sweet, rotten smell from the cab, but infinitely stronger. Inside, a kerosene lamp burned, casting dancing shadows on walls hung with tools. Not ordinary wrenches and hammers, but saws, knives, bolt cutters. Everything was stained with dark, dried spots. In a corner on the floor sat a teenager, about 15, with a dull, vacant face. He was chewing on something, and it was raw meat. He stared at me, unblinking, smacking his lips. "Sit!" Earl pointed the tire iron at the only chair by a crude wooden table. The table was covered with a sheet, sticky with something dark. I knew this was my only chance. While we were outside, while I was on my feet, I spun around and tried to bolt, but Earl was surprisingly fast. The tire iron whistled through the air and crashed into my shoulder. A sharp, burning pain shot through my body. I screamed and fell to my knees. "Naughty," Earl said simply, and hit me again on the back. My vision swam. They grabbed me under the arms and dragged me. Through a haze of pain, I saw Mabel moving a rug aside, revealing a trapdoor with an iron ring. Earl pulled the ring, the door opened, and the smell of dampness, feces, and fear hit me in the face. They threw me down. I landed on a dirt floor, the impact making me cry out again. The trapdoor slammed shut above my head and complete, absolute darkness descended. I lay there unable to move, listening to my own groaning exhale, and then I heard another breath, nearby in the corner. A quiet, hitching whisper, You're alive." I froze, not believing my ears. "Who's there?" I hissed. "My name is Lisa." The voice came from the darkness. It was weak, full of tears and terror. "They caught me 3 days ago, when my car broke down." I crawled toward the sound, my hand bumping into something soft and cold. A body. I recoiled with a stifled cry. "That's Bob," Lisa whispered. "He was before you. They took him last night. He didn't come back." My eyes began to adjust to the dark. I made out the outlines of a small cellar, earthen walls shored up with old planks. In the opposite corner, a thin girl was huddled against the wall. Her clothes were filthy, her face streaked with tears. "What are they going to do to us?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "They keep us here first. Then they take us one by one. To the shed." Her voice broke into a sob. They eat. They don't just kill. They eat." The horror I had felt before seemed like a childish fairy tale compared to what filled me now. This wasn't just death. This was consumption, to become a meal for a family of cannibals deep in the Appalachian woods. I crawled to the trapdoor and tried to lift it. It didn't budge. I felt around the edges. Massive iron hinges, a heavy wooden door. "No cracks, no weak spots. I already tried," Lisa said quietly. "It's bolted from the outside." We sat in the dark, listening to the sounds from above. Voices, laughter, the same dull, cruel sound the teenager had made. Then the creak of footsteps, the sound of a whetstone on metal. They were preparing. "We have to think of something," I said, more to quell my own fear. "We can't just sit and wait." "What?" Lisa's voice was utterly hopeless. "There are 3 of them. They're strong. They have weapons. And we have desperation," I replied, and it sounded more convincing than I felt. I started scouring the dirt floor, hoping to find a rock, a piece of wood, anything. My fingers brushed against something long and thin, a bone, a human bone. I recoiled in disgust, but forced myself to pick it up. It was a tibia, broken in the middle, forming a sharp, jagged edge. A primitive but effective weapon. I handed it to Lisa. "Hold on to this. Might be useful." Suddenly, heavy footsteps sounded from above. They were approaching the trapdoor. Lisa pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. My heart hammered wildly. The bolt scraped. The trapdoor opened a crack, and the dim light of the kerosene lamp spilled in. Earl's silhouette appeared in the opening. "Supper time?" he rasped, grinning. His gaze slid over me, then settled on Lisa. "Girl, get up here. Time for dinner." "No!" I screamed, stepping between him and Lisa. "Touch her, you bastard, and I'll—" Earl laughed. It was a dry barking sound. He came down 2 steps of the ladder leading into the cellar, the tire iron glinting in his hand again. "You're next. Don't rush." He reached for Lisa. The moment his grimy hand touched her arm, Lisa screamed with a mix of rage and fear and drove the sharpened bone into his forearm. Earl roared in pain and surprise. He jerked his hand back, blood pouring from the wound. This was our chance. I lunged at him, grabbing his legs, trying to topple him. Lisa and I, driven by a single instinct to survive, scrambled for the ladder. But Earl was strong. He swung the tire iron, catching me in the side. I felt another explosion of pain, but this time the adrenaline kept me from blacking out. We tumbled out of the cellar into the main room. Mabel and the teenager Clyde were at the table. They jumped up when they saw us. Mabel had her hatchet, and Clyde grabbed a long, curved knife from the wall. "Get him!" Earl bellowed, climbing out of the cellar and clutching his bleeding arm. We bolted for the door. Lisa was faster. She was on the threshold when Clyde lunged for her. I lagged behind, trying to distract Mabel. She swung the hatchet. I jumped back, and the blade sank into the wooden door jamb with a dull thud. I burst outside. The night was dark, moonless. Lisa was already running for the trees. I ran after her, not choosing a path, just putting distance between us and that house, that light, those people. Shouts and curses erupted behind us. The tow truck's headlights flicked on, the yellow beams cutting through the trees, illuminating our silhouettes. The engine roared. "Run!" I yelled to Lisa. "They're in the truck!" We plunged into the thicket, branches whipping our faces and arms. The truck moved slowly after us, its powerful wheels easily crushing through the undergrowth. It couldn't go fast, but it was relentless. We were quickly tiring. The truck's headlights were like the eyes of a predator, tracking us, denying us the safety of the dark. We ran, stumbling over roots, falling, getting back up. I could hear the engine roar, and Clyde's gleeful laughter from the cab window behind us. Suddenly, the forest ended. We ran out onto the edge of a deep ravine. An unseen river roared below. The way forward was cut off. The tow truck's headlights were already on us, getting closer. "Nowhere to run," Lisa whispered, despair creeping back into her voice. I looked around. To the right there was a slope littered with boulders. "There!" I shouted. We scrambled towards the rocks, trying to find cover. The tow truck stopped at the edge of the ravine. All three of them got out. Earl with a rag tied around his arm, holding the tire iron. Mabel with the hatchet. Clyde with the knife. They advanced slowly, confidently, like hunters who had cornered their prey. We were pinned between two large boulders. It was a trap. "It's over," Lisa sobbed. Then I noticed something strange. Right above us loomed a huge, precariously balanced rock, and beneath it, half hidden in the grass, was an old, rusty crowbar. Someone, perhaps another fugitive, had tried to do something with it years ago. A desperate, crazy idea formed in my head. "Lisa, distract them," I whispered. "Scream, call them over!" She looked at me puzzled, but then nodded. When the family was within a few meters, Lisa jumped out from behind the rocks and started screaming, "I'm here! Take me, just leave him alone!" It worked. All their attention shifted to her. Earl and Mabel quickened their pace. Seizing the moment, I grabbed the crowbar. It was heavy and slick with rust. I jammed it under the base of the huge boulder above us and pushed with all my might. At first, nothing happened. The muscles in my arms burned. I put my whole weight into it, growling with effort, and the rock shifted. A deep grinding sound echoed. Earl stopped, realizing what was happening, but it was too late. Slowly at first, then with a growing roar, the multi-ton boulder broke free and rolled down the slope straight toward them. Clyde managed to jump back. Mabel froze in horror. Earl tried to dodge, but the rock caught him, knocking him down and pinning his leg. A sickening crunch echoed. His scream pierced the night. Mabel rushed toward him, but another rock, dislodged by the first, was already tumbling down. I didn't wait to see the outcome. I grabbed Lisa's hand, and we ran along the edge of the ravine, leaving behind screams of pain and rage. We ran without looking back until our lungs were burning. Through the trees in the distance, a faint light glimmered, the lights of a distant farm or maybe a highway. We walked towards it, leaning on each other. Two skeletons in rags who had escaped hell. Only when we reached the asphalt road and saw the headlights of an approaching semi-truck did I allow myself to stop and look back. Back there, deep in the forest, there was silence. But I knew it was temporary. Earl, if he survived, would find a new tow truck and the yellow flashing lights would appear again on the deserted roads of the Appalachians, hunting for the next victim. And every time I see a tow truck, especially an old rusty one, an icy chill runs down my spine, because I know the truth. The most terrifying roadside assistance is the kind that shows up for you when you never called it. The fifth story. The Valley of Shadows. We entered the long tunnel somewhere in the Rocky Mountains at sunset. On one side, a blinding orange sun, on the other, thick darkness. Our Chrysler had driven exactly halfway through when the outside world went out. Not gradually, but all at once, as if someone had turned off the light. We found ourselves in absolute thick blackness, from which neither the exit nor the entrance was visible. And then something knocked on the roof in that darkness. Once, then again, and again, I slammed on the brakes. The sound of tires on asphalt. A familiar noise that was immediately swallowed by an unnatural silence. It didn't echo. It just died, as if the tunnel walls were padded with velvet. "Hey, careful!" screeched Lisa, my wife, grabbing the handle above the door. "Did you hear that?" My voice sounded alien and too loud in the oppressive silence. I heard it. A rock, probably, fell from above. She tried to sound cheerful, but I felt her hand on my shoulder trembling. Our 7-year-old son, Leo, who'd been sleeping peacefully in the back seat, woke up. "Mom? Dad, why is it so dark?" "Are we there yet?" "Not yet, sweetie." Lisa turned to him, and I heard the false smile in her voice. "It's just a very, very long tunnel. We'll be out soon." I started moving again. The speedometer needle crept upward, 20, 30, 40 km/h. The headlights shot forward, but their light didn't reach anything. It didn't reflect off walls, didn't illuminate the asphalt. It simply dissolved into the blackness like a trickle of water in sand. I looked in the side mirror. There was darkness there too, deep, bottomless, not a hint of the orange sunset we had entered just a second ago. "Mark, we were supposed to get through it in 3 minutes." Lisa's voice grew quieter. "It's already past 7. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. Showed 6:47 p.m. We had entered at 6:45, 2 minutes. But subjectively, at least 10 had passed. Thump again, right above my head. This time the sound was louder, more distinct. Not a rock. Something more massive, yet hollow, as if the metal had been struck by the knuckles of a giant hand. Leo whimpered. "What was that?" "Nothing, son," I said too sharply. "Sit still," I accelerated. The needle trembled and climbed to 60, then to 80. The engine roared, but there was no sensation of speed. No wind, no vibration. Only the roar of the engine, which also seemed muffled, as if we were speeding through cotton wool. "Mark, slow down," Lisa said fearfully. "We can't see the road." "What difference does it make?" I almost shouted. "There is no road here." I hit the brakes. The car stopped instantly without the usual lurch. I turned on the hazard lights. The orange lights blinked, but their light didn't penetrate even a meter. We were hanging in the center of an infinite black sphere. Then I opened the door. "Mark, no." But I was already leaning out. The air was cold and still, smelling of ozone, like after a thunderstorm, and something else. Metallic old. I shone my phone's flashlight down. The asphalt was there. I pointed the beam forward along the car. It hit the blackness. I shone it upward and I saw it. There, where the tunnel ceiling should have been, hung something. Not a creature, not a form. It was a dent. A huge car-sized dent in reality itself. The edges of the asphalt and concrete were twisted inward, like the petals of a wilted flower, and at the center gaped an absolute void, blacker than the surrounding blackness. And from this void, something was looking at me. I didn't see eyes, but I felt the gaze. Ancient, cold, devoid of any meaning except one. Hunger. A sound came from the dent. Not a thump. Something between a grind and a whisper. It slid over my skin, making my teeth ache and my brain shrink with primal horror. I pulled my head back inside, slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking. What did you see?" Lisa stared at me with wide eyes. "Nothing," I whispered. "We have to drive. Just drive." I turned off the hazards, floored the accelerator. The Chrysler lurched forward. We raced through nothingness. Minutes stretched into hours. The clock on the dash was frozen at 6:47 p.m. The fuel gauge didn't move. The phones were dead, their screens showing only black squares, and they kept knocking. Not just on the roof now. On the doors, on the hood, a multitude of invisible hands tapping a rhythm on our steel cocoon. Dents appeared on the metal by themselves, deep as if from sledgehammer blows. "They want inside," Leo said quietly. He wasn't crying, just sitting, pressed against the window, staring into the dark. "They say they want to see what's inside us. That we're warm." Lisa gasped and pulled him close. "It's just the wind, baby. Just the wind in the tunnel." "No." Leo shook his head. "There is no wind. They talk right in my head. They whisper. They want to know what color is, and what time is." An icy lump tightened in my chest. A child couldn't make that up. He was describing exactly the whisper I had heard. The madness began on the 2nd, or maybe the 5th day of our confinement. Time had lost its meaning. We ate the remaining food from the cooler, drank warm Coke. We took turns sleeping. But the dreams were nightmarish. In them, we fell through endless layers of darkness, and the whisper became as loud as a jet engine roar. Lisa was the first to lose her mind. She claimed she saw faces in the darkness, distorted, stretched without eyes. She talked to them, whispered something back. One night I woke up to her scream. She was trying to open the door. "They're calling me. They're showing me the way." She struggled in my arms, her eyes empty. I managed to calm her down, buckled her in. Leo watched us with a quiet, unchildlike understanding. "They're playing with us, Dad," he said, "like cats with a mouse. They don't know we break." On the 10th day, the car began to die. Not mechanically, but in some other way. The plastic of the dashboard began to bubble and flow like wax. The glass cracked by itself into thin spiderwebs. The smell of ozone became unbearable. And then the visions came. First, shadows began to flicker at the edges of the headlights, fuzzy, angular. They didn't resemble anything alive. They were more like geometric abstractions moving at impossible speeds. They flashed by, brushing against the car, leaving new dents on the body. Then the darkness outside the window began to lighten. But not towards light. It became gray, dead like a faded photograph. And in this grayness we began to see other tunnels, endless copies of our Chrysler, stuck in their own pockets of reality. In one car sat a family like ours, and a woman with mad eyes was banging her head against the glass. In another, only skeletons in clothes. In the third car sat us. Only our doubles were older, haggard with grey hair. They looked at us with indifferent despair. "That's us," Lisa whispered. "We will be here forever." I closed my eyes, but the visions penetrated directly into my brain. I saw the birth of stars and their death. I saw how the fabric of reality tore and was stitched back together by those very beings from the darkness. They weren't evil. They were beyond good and evil. We were ants to them that had crawled into the clockwork, and they studied with cold curiosity how we would behave. The whisper grew louder. It wasn't one voice now, but a chorus of millions. They spoke in a language that couldn't exist, but I began to understand something. Individual words, fragments of thoughts, loneliness, cold, outside, inside. They envied us, envied our ability to feel, our short, bright lives. They wanted to take it, study it, take it apart. Leo stopped speaking. He just sat and stared out the window, his fingers tracing complex, hypnotic patterns on the glass that began to glow faintly in the dark. I understood we were doomed. We wouldn't die of hunger or thirst. We would go mad, become part of this place, eternal prisoners of the Valley of Shadows, as I had named this place in my mind. But one day, after an endless period of grayness and visions, I saw a tiny dot ahead. Not a light, even blacker than the surrounding darkness. So black it was visible, a point of absolute nothingness, and I understood. This was the end, the exit, or the entrance to something even more terrible. The whisper around us became furious, almost panicked. The creatures didn't like that we were approaching the boundary of their domain. The blows on the car intensified. The roof buckled. The glass cracked further. "Hold on," I yelled to Lisa and Leo, though I wasn't sure if they could hear me. I aimed the car straight at this black dot. It grew, turning into a giant black sphere that swallowed everything. The whisper turned into a deafening screech that tore consciousness apart. I turned to take one last look at my family. Lisa was smiling that same mad smile, and Leo was looking at me with a completely normal child's gaze, full of terror and love. "Sorry, Dad," he said. I closed my eyes and pressed the accelerator to the floor. The impact wasn't physical. It was a blow to reality itself. The world flipped, compressed, and tore apart. I felt my body, my thoughts, my soul being pulled apart into atoms, and then light. Sharp, blinding. And sound, the horn of a truck. I yanked the wheel to avoid a head-on collision. The Chrysler swerved onto the shoulder and we came to a stop, wheels digging into the gravel. I sat, unable to move, staring at the familiar landscape. The Rocky Mountains, the setting sun. We were on the highway, right at the exit of the tunnel. An ordinary concrete tunnel, about 300 meters long. Did we... "Get out!" Lisa asked hoarsely. She looked tired, but there was no madness in her eyes, only confusion. "Yes," I whispered. "I think so." I turned to Leo. He was asleep again, his face buried in a pillow. We were saved. We were back. But when I got out of the car to inspect it, my breath caught. The entire steel body was covered in deep scratches, as if clawed by giant talons. The roof was riddled with dents, exactly like those left by that thing. The glass was a web of cracks. I walked to the edge of the cliff and looked at the tunnel. It was just a tunnel. Cars drove calmly back and forth. Lisa came up to me, took my hand. "Mark, let's get out of here, please." I nodded. We got back in the car and drove off. I watched in the rearview mirror. The tunnel shrank, turning into a small black dot. That night we stopped at a motel. Leo was quiet during dinner. Lisa took a shower. I sat on the bed trying to make sense of what had happened. Maybe it was a mass hallucination, collective psychosis. Then I glanced at the wall. On the flower-patterned wallpaper I saw a shadow, my own shadow from the lamp. But something was wrong. The shadow was fuzzy, its edges quivering. And then the shadow turned its head towards me, where there should have been no head, and winked. I cried out and recoiled. The shadow became normal again. Lisa came out of the bathroom. She looked rejuvenated. "You know, I had a strange dream while I was showering," she said. "Like we were stuck in some long tunnel." I didn't answer. I was looking at the sleeping Leo. He tossed and turned, and his face reflected terror and understanding. And on the wall above his bed, several shadows had intertwined into a complex hypnotic pattern I had seen before. A pattern that glowed in the dark, and I understood everything. We hadn't escaped the Valley of Shadows. We had carried it out with us. It was inside us, in our thoughts, in our shadows. The creatures hadn't let us go. They had just changed the cage. Now the whole world had become our tunnel, and sooner or later the darkness would knock again. But this time not on metal, from the inside. I walked to the window and looked at the night sky. The stars twinkled with a cold, indifferent light, and it seemed to me that between them gaped huge, invisible black holes, dense in reality, and from them something was looking at us, ancient, hungry, and I understood that our journey was only just beginning. The sixth story. He had been following me for 300 miles along Highway 50, the loneliest road in America. A black sedan so shiny it looked polished to a mirror finish. I hadn't seen a single passenger. On the rises, when the angle allowed a glimpse through its windshield, I saw only my own face, distorted by fear. On one such hill I looked up and it was gone. A second later I heard a tap on my side window. It was driving right alongside me, perfectly parallel, and in its dark glass I was sitting there staring back at myself with dead eyes. An icy needle plunged into my spine. My hand jerked the wheel to the left, recoiling from the nightmare. My old Honda Civic swerved, tires squealing unpleasantly on the asphalt. I veered into the oncoming lane, my heart hammering in my throat, ready to burst. My ears were ringing with the deafening roar of fear. After straightening the car, I slumped into the seat and glanced in the rearview mirror. It was empty. Sweat streamed down my temples. I swallowed a lump that refused to go down. A hallucination, I whispered hoarsely. Fatigue, sunstroke, anything. But when I looked in the right side mirror, it was there. The black sedan, perfectly matching my speed, maintaining a distance of exactly 10 meters. I could make out every detail, the same silhouette behind the wheel. My own jacket, my shoulders, my hair. But the face, it was a pale, waxy mask of my face. The eyes, two empty black holes. I slammed on the accelerator. The tachometer needle climbed toward 100. The Nevada desert outside the window blurred into a streak of dusty brown and yellow. I watched in the mirror. The black sedan didn't fall back an inch. It didn't speed up. It just was there, as if tethered to my bumper by an invisible rope. Get back! I screamed, hitting the steering wheel with my palm. I dropped my speed to 40. The sedan did the same. I tried slamming on the brakes, hoping it would shoot past me. But it synchronized its movement with such supernatural foresight that not a centimeter changed between our bumpers. This wasn't a pursuer. It was a reflection. Distorted, sinister, but a reflection. The sun was setting, casting long, ugly shadows from the lone rock formations. I passed a sign. Caution! Next gas, 98 miles. 98 miles of this hell. My fingers were numb from gripping the wheel so tightly. That's when I noticed the strangeness. In my mirror double, I saw details that shouldn't be there. On its passenger seat lay a battered copy of Zelazny's Chronicles of Amber, my favorite book from college, lost years ago. On its back seat was an old teddy bear, an exact copy of the one I'd once given to Lisa. Lisa, whom I had left. The thought was like an electric shock. I focused on the reflection of the driver. There was no fear on its face, only emptiness and judgment. No, worse. Indifference. Absolute icy indifference to everything that was happening. Darkness fell rapidly. I turned on my headlights. In the rearview mirror, the black sedan did the same. Its lights came on, but their glow wasn't yellow and warm. It was a sickly greenish hue. It illuminated the road ahead, and under that light, the asphalt looked dead. I tried not to look. I stared straight ahead at the road, fleeing into the darkness. But in my peripheral vision, I saw that green glow. I heard the perfectly synchronized engine noise, an exact copy of my Honda's sound, but with a faint metallic undertone. Like nails scraping on tin. An hour passed. 2. I was shaking from fear and exhaustion. The gas station. I had to make it to the gas station. There would be people there. Light. I wouldn't be alone. Finally, a lone light appeared in the distance. An oasis in this sea of darkness. I felt a surge of weak hope. I accelerated. The sedan accelerated with me. The midpoint gas station consisted of a tiny shop and 4 pumps. Under the yellow light of the lamp stood a huge truck with its diesel engine running. A truck driver was smoking nearby. It was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. I swerved into the station, pulled up to the farthest pump, and killed the engine. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm. I was afraid to look. I took a deep breath and slowly turned my head. The parking lot was empty. No black sedan, just the truck, my Honda, and the endless night beyond the island of light. I exhaled with such relief that my vision darkened. Tears welled up in my eyes. A hallucination, I repeated, now believing it. Just a hallucination. I got out of the car and my legs buckled. I had to lean against the door. The air was cold and dry. The truck driver nodded at me. I nodded back, trying to arrange my face into a normal expression. The gas station was tiny. A teenager glued to his phone sat behind the counter. I bought the largest cup of coffee I could find, a bottle of water, and a chocolate bar. My hands were still shaking. Everything all right? The kid asked, probably noticing my pallor. Yeah, just a long drive, I forced out. Driving the 50 alone is quite the experience, he agreed. People see all sorts of wonders. Mirages, lights. He chuckled meaningfully. Lights, I thought. Green headlights. Has anyone else been here recently? In a black sedan? I asked, trying to sound casual. The kid shook his head. Haven't seen anyone for 3 hours. Just you in that rig. I nodded, paid, and walked out. The coffee was terrible, but it was hot. I leaned against the hood of my car, feeling the tremors slowly subside. I was among people, Even if it was just one trucker and a sleepy cashier, I wasn't alone. That's when I saw it. Not on the road. In the dark window of the shop. A reflection. My reflection? I was standing leaning against the hood holding a cup of coffee. But in the reflection I wasn't alone. Right behind my shoulder, almost touching me, stood him. My double. His face was so close I could see every pore, every line of my own but dead skin. His eyes weren't looking at me through the glass, but as if from within the reflection itself. And he was smiling. A short, cold smirk full of unspeakable mockery. I recoiled, splashing hot coffee on my hand. I spun around. No one. Just the empty parking lot and the night. "Hey man, you sure you're okay?" the trucker shouted. I didn't answer. I scrambled into my car in a panic, slammed the door and hit the central lock button. The sound of the click was like salvation. It was back. Not on the road. It was in the reflections. I started the car and screeched out of the gas station back onto the highway. In the rearview mirror, the lights of Midpoint quickly shrank and vanished. And immediately, as if by magic, 2 green dots materialized behind me. It was there. I raced through the dark desert, pursued by my reflection. There were no thoughts, only an animal, primal fear. I was driving at top speed, but the sedan didn't fall behind. It didn't get closer. It just was, my eternal companion. And then I realized what it was doing. It wasn't just mirroring my movements. It was mirroring my route. When I habitually shifted half a meter to the left, it did the same. When I eased off the gas for a second before an almost imperceptible bump I remembered from my drive here 3 days ago, it decelerated in sync. It was mirroring not just my driving. It was mirroring my life, my habits, my mistakes. Then the memories came flooding in, the ones I'd locked away in the farthest closet of my mind for years. Lisa, our fight. I was tired, angry after a failed business trip. She was talking about the future, about children, about me always being away. Then I yelled, said nasty things, accused her of dragging me down. I saw the light go out of her eyes, how that same dead film appeared over them, the one I now saw in my double's gaze. I slammed the door and left, drove away on this very Highway 50. She called. I sent her to voicemail, and the next morning her sister called me. Lisa had been in an accident. She was crying at the wheel, lost control on a wet road. I had never forgiven myself for that. I had been running from myself, from the guilt, from that empty look I had seen in her eyes for the last time. And now that guilt, that dark underbelly of my soul, had materialized and was pursuing me. It was following me in a mirror sedan, offering me a look at the truth. "I'm guilty," I screamed into the empty cabin. "I'm guilty, understand? Leave me alone." The green headlights in the mirror didn't flinch. Suddenly, the sedan surged forward. It pulled up alongside me just like the first time. I squeezed my eyes shut, unable to look, but nothing happened. No tap, no screech of metal. I opened my eyes. It was driving next to me. In its dark window, I saw myself. But it wasn't the zombie me. It was me from the past. Me yelling at Lisa. I saw my face contorted with anger, spittle flying from the corners of my lips. I saw that whole terrible evening, replayed in minute detail behind the glass of the black sedan. I watched, mesmerized. I couldn't look away. It was the most horrible show on earth. The show of my downfall. And then the picture changed. I saw my present self, sitting behind the wheel, but from the outside. I saw my disheveled appearance, my wild eyes, my insane expression. I saw myself as I truly was, a cornered animal running from itself, and at that moment the fear began to transform. It didn't leave. It became deeper, heavier. This wasn't fear of an external threat. It was the fear of self-awareness, the horror of seeing one's own ugliness. We drove like that for several miles, parallel. 2 cars, 2 people, the same person. Then the sedan began to slowly drift into my lane. Not to push me off the road. It began to merge with my car. It was impossible, unthinkable, but I saw it with my own eyes. Its dark, shiny side started to overlay mine like 2 pieces of film. Through its window I saw the desert. Through my own, its interior. It was passing through me. I felt a soul-freezing cold. Not physical, but spiritual. The cold of emptiness. The cold of that gaze my double had. And I understood the choice. It wasn't a choice between life and death. It was a choice between truth and madness. I could keep running, and this ghost would haunt me for the rest of my days, driving me insane in every reflection. Or I could accept it, accept my guilt, my monster. Look at it not as an enemy, but as a part of myself. The sedan was already halfway inside my car. I saw my second reflection sitting beside me. It looked at me, and in its eyes there was no mockery now. There was a question. I took my foot off the accelerator. The car began to slow down. I stopped fighting. I looked at my double, at that version of me that had stayed behind, in the past, with the pain and guilt I had tried to bury. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I didn't know to whom. To Lisa, to myself, to both of them. The double slowly nodded. The cold reached my heart. It was unbearable, but there was a strange clarity in it. I saw everything, my whole life, all the mistakes, and they no longer burned. They just were. Facts. The black sedan dissolved completely into my Honda. I was alone in the cabin. The car rolled smoothly onto the shoulder and stopped. Silence. Only the faint whistle of the wind outside the window. I looked at myself in the rear-view mirror. He was looking back at me. Me. But different. The eyes were calm, deep. There was pain in them, but not hysteria. There was acceptance. I slowly raised my hand. The reflection repeated the movement. But this was no longer pursuit. It was unity. I stared into the eyes of my doppelganger, the eyes of my guilt. And I saw in them not an enemy, but liberation, at the cost of the disappearance of the person I had been, the one who ran. I don't know who is driving the car now, him or me. Perhaps we are one. I turned my head and looked at the passenger seat. It was empty, but I felt a presence, my eternal passenger. I started driving again. Highway 50 stretched ahead, still just as lonely, but I no longer felt alone. I peered into the darkness beyond the headlights, and it no longer frightened me. I was driving toward my fate, whatever it might be, with the mirror reflection in my heart and behind me, which had become not a jailer, but a part of the road home, where I was awaited not by the forgiveness I didn't deserve, but by a quiet, silent truth. And that was more terrifying than any chase, and calmer than any oblivion. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It rang in my ears, pressed on my eardrums, was thick and physical like cotton wool. I sat in the stalled car on the shoulder of the loneliest road in America and listened to it. The wind had died down. The night insects had fallen silent as if holding their breath. Even the noise of my own blood, which had been pounding deafeningly in my temples just minutes ago, had now quieted. I looked at my hands, still gripping the wheel. They were mine, the same scars, the same knobby knuckles, but they felt different, as if someone had put gloves on me, perfectly matching the shape of my hands, but made of a slightly colder, slightly denser material. I slowly turned my head and looked in the rearview mirror. He was looking at me. That same calm, deep gaze I had seen at the moment of merging. But now it wasn't a reflection in the mirror. It was a gaze from within. I was looking into my own eyes and seeing a stranger who knew everything about me. What now? I thought. The thought sounded in my head in my voice, but with a strange, detached resonance. No answer came. No voice, no visions. Just a quiet, undeniable knowing. The knowledge that the chase was over. There was nowhere left to run. Because I had caught up with myself, I started the engine again. The sound seemed muffled, as if I were inside a soundproof capsule. I pulled away and drove further west. The actions were mechanical, precise. I didn't think about the road, the speed, the destination. I just drove. And that's when the real miracles began. I looked at the road, and through the image of the asphalt lit by the headlights, other pictures began to show through. As if someone were overlaying one film onto another. I saw not only the desert, I saw the streets of our town where Lisa and I had walked, the rain on the windshield the night I left, her face not contorted by pain but ordinary. Smiling. The very smile I had diligently erased from my memory, replacing it with the last distorted image of suffering. It didn't hurt. It was true. I didn't only see the bad. I saw everything. Every moment, every cause, and every effect. I saw my fatigue, my irritation, my selfishness. But I also saw her insecurity, her quiet reproaches that she hadn't dared to voice directly. I saw how we both, like two blind kittens, were walking towards the cliff without seeing it. It was simpler. More frightening, but simpler. The lie I had been feeding myself for years, that I was the only monster in this story, crumbled to dust. I was just a human, weak, mistaken, frightened. Just like her, I drove for a few more hours. Dawn found me somewhere in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. The first rays of sunlight hit the windshield and I saw my reflection in it. It was whole. There was no more split. The eyes looked at the world with an unfamiliar calm. They held a weariness, not physical, but the kind that had accumulated over decades. And there was something else in them. Acceptance. I didn't stop in the first town I came to. I drove straight through, not looking at the gas stations or motels. The goal that had once seemed so important, to reach the coast, to start over with a clean slate, was now devalued. There was nothing to start. A clean slate didn't exist. There was only one, scribbled all over, and my task was not to tear pages from it, but to finally read what was written. I turned onto a small mountain road. It wound like a serpentine among the pines. The air became clean and cold. I opened the window. The smell of pine needles and damp earth flooded the cabin. Real. Alive. I found a lookout point and stopped. Below lay a valley shrouded in morning mist. I got out of the car and my body ached with a dull pain in every muscle. I leaned against the hood and looked down. There was no one next to me. But I felt a presence, heavy, inalienable, like a shadow. But a shadow not behind, but inside. What will we do? I asked mentally, addressing what had become a part of me, and this time an answer came. Not in words, but as a stream of images. I saw a quiet house, not new, not perfect, old, in need of repair. I saw my hands working with wood, not for money, for something else, for silence, for meaning. I saw myself sitting on a porch in the evening, looking at the stars. Without panic, without running, just looking. It wasn't the future. It was a possibility. Lonely, difficult, but real. I got back in the car. On the passenger seat lay that very battered Zelazny book I had seen in the mirror sedan. I picked it up. The paper was rough, familiar. I opened it to a random page and realized I didn't remember the plot at all. I remembered loving it, but the actual words, the images, everything was erased. As if someone had taken an eraser and wiped my memory clean, leaving only the outlines. That was the price. A part of me, the one who ran, who screamed, who loved those books, who gave teddy bears, that part was gone, dissolved into that black mirror entity. Only the witness remained, the one who had accepted the truth. I put the book back. It was no longer mine. I drove to a small town at the foot of the mountains. It was called Silver Creek. It had one main street, a couple of shops, and a gas station. I rented a house on the outskirts, an old one, just as I had seen in that vision, with a leaky roof and a sagging porch. I didn't introduce myself with a new name. I said my name was Alex. It was my name. I had no other. Weeks passed, months. I lived quietly. I found work at a local furniture repair shop. The days passed in a monotonous rhythm. The sound of a plane, the smell of varnish, quiet conversations with the owner, an old Finn who was more silent than talkative. At night, I sat on the porch. Sometimes I brought a glass of wine. Sometimes I just sat and looked into the darkness. I was no longer afraid of reflections. In the glass of the window I saw my face, aged, calm, with eyes that held a shadow. The shadow of the black sedan. The shadow of Lisa. The shadow of my guilt. It had become part of my landscape, like a scar on my hand. It doesn't hurt, but it's always there, reminding me of the past. One evening, while sorting through an old toolbox, I found a photograph at the bottom. It was wedged between two rusty wrenches. It was a young couple, him and her. They were laughing, hugging against the backdrop of some lake. I didn't remember if it was me or Lisa, but I recognized the feeling. The feeling of lightness that I had long forgotten. I didn't throw the photo away. I put it on the mantelpiece, not as a memory of a specific event, but as a reminder that life is not only pain and retribution, that there were those moments too, and perhaps there would be more. Sometimes, driving on a mountain road in my now battered SUV, I would see headlights of another car in the rearview mirror in the dark. They weren't green. They were ordinary yellow. But for a second, reflecting at a certain angle, they seemed familiar. And I felt not fear, but a strange calm. I didn't speed up or brake. I just drove on, knowing that my reflection was always with me. It doesn't pursue. It just follows me, like a quiet companion. Like a silent guardian of the blackest and brightest truth about who I am. I haven't healed. I haven't found peace in the conventional sense. I just stopped running, and in that cessation I gained something more than peace. I gained silence, and in silence it turns out you can finally hear yourself. Even if that self is two broken beings forever fused into one, having found in the end not forgiveness, but a truce on the shoulder of a lonely road.